Activities. The next activity will be the annual general meeting of the foundation to be held tomorrow at Legacy House from 2 p.m. And all those who are interested are invited to attend that annual general meeting and to take up membership, forms of which are available even today at the back of the hall. Our next activity after the AGM will be a church service at Kitty Methodist, as is our tradition, on Sunday at 8 p.m. 8 a.m. Kitty Methodist, William Street, Kitty. And that activity will be followed by our annual commemorative cycle race on Sunday afternoon from Carifest Avenue to Belfield and back. So those are the activities that we traditionally have and are having this year to commemorate the birth anniversary of the founder, Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. So you are welcome to this, the first in the list of activities. The Burnham Foundation, as you may or may not know, was registered in 2005. It's a non-governmental organization registered in 2005 with a mission to commemorate and memorialize Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. This activity is kept within the context of memorializing and commemorating the life of Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. Today we are going to deal with the topic, the need for the politics of Guyana to return to ground zero. Now, I am quite sure that topic its meaning doesn't come to mind immediately, but I'm assured that during the course of the presentation, it will in fact resonate with you as to what we really need by the need for the nation's politics to ground zero, what we refer to as zero-sum politics. In terms of the format of today's activity, we will simply have a presentation on that topic, after which we will open up the floor for questions and comments, to which we will respond at the end. We will not respond intermittently to your questions or comments. We will give one summary response. The person who has been chosen to make today's presentation is none other than Attorney Nigel Hughes. Those of us in the Burnham Foundation and probably in the wider community, we will refer to him as our senior counsel. So our senior counsel is the person who has been chosen to make this presentation. And this has been a thoroughly thought through selection as who should make this presentation. And this is the view of the Burnham Foundation, at least its board, who discussed this matter thoroughly. And that, if I may, Nigel is quite suited to make this presentation for more than one reason. For more than one reason. When we talk about ground zero in the history of Guyana's politics, then Nigeria is aptly located at ground zero in terms of his own history, his traverse to where he is now, and his look back to where he was then. Now that might sound very esoterical, but again you get to understand that as he makes this presentation. In many regards, having him gives us the opportunity to symbolize, as much as we understand what we mean by ground zero in Guyana's politics. It is the view of the Burnham Foundation, as an independent organization, that what we are embarking on this evening hopefully is a journey that will make a difference to the politics of this country. And it will see us going back to ground zero and being able to re-emerge on that challenge of nationhood, building a nation in a manner that will in fact lead to us building a nation and getting to the point where we can speak about one people, one nation, one destiny, which is what Guyana really should be about. As you all know, as I said earlier, our presenter is Attorney General. Sorry. Attorney at Law, Nigel Hughes. I wouldn't venture on this occasion to attempt any lengthy introduction of Nigel. We all know him as one of our foremost attorneys at law in this country, an attorney at law who is prepared to work with the people in the interests of the people. I think that speaks for itself. He has the fortune of heading probably what's the biggest law firm in Guyana, something which has been, in some regards, bequeathed to him. And that again tells us the ground zero story, that Nigeria is carrying forth an institution that was birthed way back when, probably birthed when we were at the original ground zero. And he has brought that forward in a manner that if the nation is to come forward in that manner, then we'll be on the right path. So once again, you see the kind of reasoning for the choice of Nigel as the person to make the presentation today. In closing my introduction of Nigel, I'm going to take some liberty. I don't know if I ever took it in his presence. And it will take some understanding. But you know, some years ago, and if I'm not mistaken, last year, Ron Robinson staged a play, which, if my memory is right, is called The Rebirth of the Red Men. The Last of the Red Men. I call it Rebirth, sorry. The Last of the Red Men. No, that is not a literal red man, but it's a connotation about red men, so to speak, and their role, which can be explained from an anthropological perspective in Guyana. And I have had reason to, and this is why I probably called it the rebirth, because I normally refer to Nigel as that rebirth, the rebirth of the red man. And it has nothing to do with his closeness to being red. It has to do with a different understanding, anthropological understanding of the role of red men in Guyana. But if you go back to ground zero, Then at ground zero, there was a scope for red men to be different and to make a difference. And they did make the wrong difference. They did make the wrong difference. And here is Nigel, the rebirth of the red man, who can symbolize making the right difference. Nigel, the podium is yours.
Good evening, Mr. Chairperson, honored and celebrated elders, Mr. Green particularly, distinguished guests, brothers and sisters who are present and those who have joined us virtually, the faithful representatives of the next generation, and those who have joined us for other purposes. My mother would not agree with Vincent. There's nothing much read, but he did say it in a context in which it was not literal, so I appreciate the context. On the 101st birth anniversary of Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham, you have honored and humbled me by this extraordinary invitation to address you on the subject, Guyana needs to restart from ground zero, and the issue of zero-sum politics in Guyana. I am deeply appreciative of this most gracious opportunity that you've afforded me. There is an African proverb which says, if we stand tall, it is because we stand on the shoulders of many ancestors. This proverb teaches us that the importance of studying the past, derive lessons from it for the purposes of shaping our future. It reminds us that we are who we are because of those that have come before us. Whatever we identify ourselves with today, it is because of the lot of the work that has been accumulated over time, generation after generation. Sir Isaac Newton adopted it and put it this way: if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. Standing on the shoulders of giants is a metaphor which means using the understanding of major thinkers who've gone before us in order to make intellectual progress. We see more and farther than our predecessors, not because we have a keener vision or greater height, but because we are lifted upon the shoulders of their gigantic structure. We master their wisdom, move beyond it. Due to their wisdom, we grow wise and we are able to say all that we say, not because we are greater than they are. There is no doubt that Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham's enormous shoulders upon which we stand today provided the basis for a new and different approach to the struggles of the peoples of the developing world in the era of the vicious apartheid economic, political, and social structures in Southern Hemisphere of Africa, the commitment to non-alignment in a world divided between the East and West, and for us here in Guyana, the struggle to remove the colonial political, economic, and social structures in our quest for true independence by controlling and developing our natural resources for our own benefit. In order to assess how far we've advanced or retreated, we must start with the examination of our journey after 74 years from our ground zero. And that was the formation of the People's Progressive Party on the 1st of January 1950. And it's important that I'm referring to the 1st of January 1950. In the words of Martin Carter, I quote, "And only where our footprints end can tell whether the journey was an old advance or a new retreat." The underlying fundamental principle of our progressive political philosophy at ground zero, in whatever form it manifested itself, was that it was necessary to have the two principal ethnic groups in the composition of the leadership of Guyana. The Political Affairs Committee, which preceded the PPP, had Cheddi Jagan and Ashton Chase. This was followed by the development of the first mass-based multiracial political party, the PPP, which at its inception had Forbes Burnham as chairman and Cheddi Jagan as leader. It is proffered by most that the formation of the People's Progressive Party as a multiracial mass party in 1950 and the people's electoral success in the 1953 elections were seen as seminal moments in the emergence of British Guyana as an independent nation. The hopes for a new, progressive, united political movement were dashed in 1955 when the parties split due to ideological differences. It is extremely useful to remember the world at that time was divided between East and West. It is even more important to appreciate that while the leadership of that party split on ideological grounds, the membership and the general citizenry split on ethnic lines. The differences were manifested in the left-wingers backing Jagan in the leadership contest and the more moderates backing Mr. Burnham. Ideology was the chasm. J.B. Lachman Singh and Jainarayan Singh accompanied Mr. Burnham, where they became chairman and secretary of the People's National Congress, while Koyana, Ben, and Carter remained with Jagan. The split at the level of the citizenry was not ideological, as the people were not ideological at that time. The level of their political development had not been elevated to the stage where they were committed to the ideology. They were not driven either by communism or socialism. The split was ethnic, and at the level of the membership and the population, it clearly was ethnic. The split along ethnic lines created a new incentive regime in politics. The primary objective was votes, and ethnicity emerged as the principal marketing focus, both overt and covert. Politics in British Guyana and Guyana has been characterized by ideological differences, ethnic division, and stark political contestation to the extent that the emergent nation has been unable to emerge and realize its full socio-economic potential. Unlike the rest of the Caribbean, where political development was characterized by parties which were both left and right of center, Guyana had a unique political history of its principal political parties being both left of center in an ethnically divided society. With the political incentive regime driven by ethnic politics, a world divided between East and West, the rapid nationalization of large external principal business operations in less than a decade, supported by both major political parties, the migration of the management skills which were located principally in the middle class at that time, the opiate oil crisis, Guyana was in desperate straits by the late 70s and early 80s. Prior to his death, efforts were made at a national reconciliation driven by what must have been the realization that neither ethnic group was capable of managing Guyana on its own. The Berlin Wall came down, and with it the cessation of the Cold War. The emergence of the free market economy as the dominant economic and political philosophy was embraced completely on both sides of the political spectrum. This effectively eliminated the ideological differences between our major political parties at the time. From the era of Desmond Hoyt, and for the first time since 1950, were the political ideologies of both major parties the same. In theory, it may be argued that the impediments to national united effort as a precondition for Guyana's development thrust had been dissipated and removed. However, our problems persisted, and they persist, and appear to remain intractable and beyond resolution. Our anachronistic political contestation, grounded in histrionics and opportunistic postures, remain part of the obstacles to our development. Mutual historic allegations and finger-pointing consisting of allegations of foreign support and intervention in our politics, cultivation of ethnic enclaves as power bases, stereotyping, allocation of state resources based on party or ethnic affiliation, rigged electoral practices from voted lists to manipulation of the count, and this list goes on and on. Prior to the discovery of oil, which had nothing to do with the efforts of either political party, we failed miserably to develop and diversify the economy. It was obvious from the mid-1970s, that we were unable to compete globally in the production of sugar, yet we persisted for years, for political reasons, to maintain an industry which could have only survived in a protected market. We continue to lose our tertiary educated graduates at the rate of attrition of over 80%. Our politics inhibited the development of our dear Guyana. So now we're back at 1950. Without ideological differences between the major parties, we have sufficient financial resources to develop the country, but we also have a divide perhaps even greater than that of the 1950s, which persists between our peoples. The major difference is that we are at ground zero -1. The reason for this description is that in 1950, at the time of the formation of the PPP with Lfs Burnham and Chetty Jagan at the helm, there was the promise of a united people without ideological differences, committed to the creation of a new nation state based on equality, justice, and control of our natural resources to be exploited for our own benefit. Then the struggle was against inequality and justice and injustice. Today, we are the creators of inequality and injustice in an ethnically divided society. Elder Koyana used to say and has published that there is no guilty race. I, with great deference and humility, would like to suggest that we are all guilty. Perhaps of the embrace of truth and reconciliation, equal responsibility for past heresies, and a commitment to mutual respect, good governance, all built on the recognition that we are in the same boat, which can only go forward if there is a cohesive paddling in a direction of collectively agreed upon policies. The question is, where do we start? From a position of 0 -1. How do we build a nation from ground zero -1? We must start with a commitment to build a country based on equality, equal participation, equal rights, and justice for all. We must embrace truth and reconciliation, accept equal responsibility for past heresies, and demonstrate a commitment to mutual respect and good governance. All of this built on the recognition that we are in the same boat, which can only go forward if there is cohesive paddling in a direction collectively agreed upon. We must start by acknowledging our ethnic realities, economic, social, and political. We must start with a commitment to be fair, just, and realistic participation of the citizenry in the decision-making processes of this country. We must start by acknowledging that the current political architecture of this country is woefully inadequate and inappropriate for the development of a fair, just, and modern Guyana. We must engage. Inequality and rumors of inequality can only be addressed if we start from a position that disaggregated data is a critical element for identifying unserved, underserved, and disserved communities in our Guyana. We must find truth and reconciliation, which in the absence of ideological differences ought not to prove difficult. The role of a state in a modern market economy has changed from the times when the state could aspire to control the commanding heights of the economy. Everything is now determined by the marketplace. Education, information, information technology, their management, and the advent of artificial intelligence are areas which must preoccupy our national development planning. How do we prepare our citizens to compete in a new world of oil wealth, which would demand the highest standards of management and investment skills in order to avoid the vagaries of a very sophisticated, militarized, and polarized world? How do we manage, control, and leverage our natural resources for our national collective benefit? How do we develop our greatest national resource, our people, in the creation of a new modern society? The role and influence of the state at 0-1 is strictly restricted in the market economy. It is primarily regulatory, but with the freedom by way of policies to create structured, diversified economic development. Government-funded business incubators for the business development of our people at all levels: community schools, high school, secondary school, technical colleges, and universities are now mandatory. Disaggregated data collection and its deployment to drive policy must be a mandatory requirement of a new Guyana. Policies driven by disaggregated data must be embedded in our national development program. Permit me to quote Lyndon Forbes Sanson Burnham on the question of racial integration in his seminal work, A Destiny to Mold. And this is what he said: "Another aspect to which we must pay careful attention is that of race. There are some of my race," referring to the Africans, "who express such sentiments as black man must be on top, and a similar tendency on the part of Comrade Lachman Singh's race group," referring to the Indians, to say Kuliman must be on top. Such sentiments are integrated by the enemies of our party and of our movement, and the British government will give anything for them to gain white currency. This is no laughing matter. If the racialist feelings, latent or rather patent, in these sentiments is allowed to spread, it will have a most ruinous effect, unquote. He went on to warn us in A Destiny to Mold, quote, "If we are to continue in unity, we must banish racialism. Each racial group is entitled to feel pride in its cultural traditions and heritage, but we must not have racial differences reflected in the politics of our country," unquote. With the not too distant, race is perhaps the most potent and most destructive force which engulfs us today in Guyana. With a not too distant second of neo-colonialization after a long and proud history of non-alignment. Tragically, we would have walked ourselves backwards all on our own, unaided and without excuse, into this new neo-colonial era. We will all be consumed. Vincent mentioned, and he was speaking theoretically, about red men. I want to mention that we are sometimes too harsh, too unforgiving in our assessment of our political leaders who brought us to independence and afterward. We must always remember that they were first generation persons, progressive, I would dare say the most progressive in the Caribbean, that understood what the battle was, but they were without the benefit of the guidance of elders who had experienced power. We have now come full circle from the progressive political movements and ideologies that existed in the 1950s and 1960s and the development that we saw in 1970s to a stage where we have been walking ourselves backwards. I had I will share with you two experiences that blew me away. I will admit that I perhaps was the product of privilege, but I was speaking to a young progressive brother the other day, and as I drove him past the corner of Brickdam and Manjit Place, I asked him if he knew what law firm was there. He didn't know. That didn't surprise me. What floored me, however, was that when I asked him if he knew about the law firm of Clark and Martin, he'd never heard of it. I then said to him, there was a time in this country where no African barrister or solicitor actually had a law firm. The entire legal profession was dominated by people of a different hue. The economic resources of this country were concentrated in very few hands. And it was in the decision in 1976 of then Mr. Burnham to provide free education that allowed people who would never have seen the doors of either a secondary school, but most certainly university, to reach the stage where they can now afford to forget the sacrifice that allowed them to be in that position. That is a sad commentary on our failure to educate our young people about the history and the struggle. And if you are without knowledge of your history, if you are without knowledge of the sacrifices that have afforded you to be at a place where you think you can forget your past or not want to acknowledge it, then your future development, I dare say with the greatest respect, is limited. The second example that I want to share is a more contemporary one. It doesn't speak to the African people, but it does speak to us in another way. Guyana in 2022 produced students who topped the entire Caribbean at CXC. Fantastic feat. 24 subjects, 22 subjects, diverse range of subjects. We can have a separate discussion whether that is necessary, but we topped the Caribbean. In the same year, our indigenous brothers and sisters who lived in the riverine areas could not produce a single student who could get a grade A. That is like living in South Africa pre-1992. How could we, at a time when we have so much resources available to us, have brothers and sisters who suffer from that form of structural apartheid? We were a people that always stood up for each other. When South Africa was in trouble, at great international peril and at great economic peril, Lfs Burnham made Guyana available to the Cuban army that was flying to Southwest Africa to fight the South African army, which had invaded all the South African countries. There was a battle which was a turning battle, led to the defeat of the South African army, and they retreated. And that ultimately led to 1992, when Mandela was able to walk out. Burnham took a stand when the British cricket team came here in 1976, I think it was, and there was a player called Jackman who had connections with South Africa. And he said that he couldn't come. He certainly couldn't play on this soil. The country was so distorted in its social development. The Red Men, as Vincent referred to, thought it was an appalling decision. It stood the test of time, and that decision was justified. We have to be conscious, we have to be aware, and in this time of plenty, if we do not plan for a time when there is no plenty, what is clearly developing as perhaps the most pernicious economic division of our society, we will all be consumed. I thank you. for allowing me the privilege. Good evening.
Thank you very much, Nigel. It is a practice in the communication industry when somebody takes to the media for the owner of the entity to say that those views are not those of the entity. We would like to differ this evening. Those views are views that are embraced by the Burnham Foundation. And we are glad to have found in Nigel someone who shares those views and who has probably articulated it better than we ourselves. We're in the boat together, and we're going to row together if that's where we ought to be going. And so it's an opportunity now for you to have clarity about your own disposition and whether you're in the boat or not, and what information you would need if you're to get on board. And we'll do that by virtue of opening up the floor to questions, answers, and comments. We are not going to intermit that process with answers. We are going to allow a free flow of questions, which we will note, a free flow of comments, which we will also note at the end of that. Then from the head table, as far as is possible, we will respond and will do a summation. I therefore now open up the floor to you, but please, in your questions and in your comments, try to be as concise and as precise as possible. The floor is open. I've noticed already one hand way back. Could you come to the center, probably to the podium? I recognize this as one Mike Singh.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Nigel, listening to you. Let me begin by saying many of you know my uncle, Kami Ramsarup, and Sashridat Ramphal, and I was very close to President Hoyt. I will be remiss if I did not acknowledge the late President Burnham's gift that I benefited from, free education. I went to Dolphin Secondary School, primary school, a public school, and then I went on to Bishop's into England. The education that Forbes Burnham afforded me in my generation, free school books, textbooks, biscuits, inoculation at school, that is something I don't see everywhere in the world or in Guyana. And that free education propelled me to great heights in my career in the world of technology. I went on to become head of strategy for AT&T at the age of 25. I managed 5,000 people. When we were doing the brick subsea cable, I beat out Brazil in being elected chair of the supplier consortium by the African countries because of Forbes Burnham's and Guyana's contribution to the Southern African freedom struggle. They're remembered, and Nigel made mention of Southwest Africa. I've been to Namibia. Many of these places, they remember the contributions of Guyana and what Forbes Burnham did. But Nigel made mention of an area that I'm very active in, which is artificial intelligence and information communication technology. I have a joint venture with Nokia. I own 75%. And I can tell you, Guyana is not going to get to to what Nigel talks about unless we get back to free education from cradle to grave. Education, access to free healthcare, access to bandwidth, these are now fundamental human rights. We cannot, as a nation, compete in an increasingly technologically driven society unless our people are prepared. And that starts with the fundamental free education. I remember that, free from nursery to university. Why we have all this oil and gas wealth, and we can't do that for our people, and we continue to treat our teachers with great disdain and contempt. Mahatma Gandhi said, the world has enough for everyone's need, but not their greed. Gandhi also talked about healing and reconciliation, but he also said poverty was the greatest form of violence. No person in Guyana should be mired or be deep in poverty. Let me recognize Uncle Hammy. You are a great reservoir of knowledge. I hope you don't take it all and you leave some with us. So thank you, Vincent and Nigel. I just want to say thanks to Lfs Burnham and his administration for the free education that I have benefited from and that has propelled me. God bless Burnham and what he's done for the third world. Thank you.
Thank you. I recognize the second contributor. As you come forward, if I don't see who you are, please announce your own being.
Thank you, Vincent. Thank you, Nigel, for a well-presented tour. Pardon, Glendon Harris. Yeah. You proffered that Guyana has a market economy. What I've seen for myself is a deliberate transfer of wealth, state wealth, to a particular group based on the belief that they ought to be superior in this environment. Now, in spite of the comprehensiveness of the list of preconditions that you've identified for us to succeed as a country, I think that the issue of race and its potency and the fact that it's being reinforced, not just by policy, but in a practical way. What in your view is the role of this foundation building on the rich heritage that was left by Lyndon Forbes, Samson Burnham, to make sure that we can challenge the existing structure and also take a lead in creating a Ghana that we can all feel proud of? Thank you.
Thank you, Glendon. The question has been noted and will be addressed in due course. Do I see any other? I do see another.
Good afternoon, everyone. I don't have a question. Actually, I want to say something. I grew up in Agricola as a young girl in poverty. I grew up with my grandmother. And I remember back in the days, I used to go buy coffee and stand within the crowd and listen to Lyndon Forbes, Samson Burnham. If I cry, let me cry tears of joy. He left a lifetime legacy. I could not afford my grandmother. The poverty was so bad. And because of the father of this nation, Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. History cannot be erased. I'm a living testimony that I could go back with what I received, free education from nursery to university in that same community, and share the legacy that this man left. And I want to thank God. Knowledge is power. I could say so much. May his soul rest in peace and he rise in glory. I could make a difference in the lives of young people out there. I could go to all Bison, whatever bad neighborhood you call it. Could anything good come out of Agricola? Yes, he left a legacy, a generation to pass on. And I want to say thank God for giving me a second chance to be here. I have so much to say, I don't have the time. But poverty, it's a curse. It's a crime to be poor. And Guyana have enough riches, wealth to enrich the poor. Nobody should be poor in this country. But this God that I serve, I know to pray good. When I start praying, what don't happen in years, going to happen in a day. God don't sleep. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've seen and recognized another contributor. Please come forward.
Good afternoon to the Taylor. Mr. Hughes, I didn't hear your comment, but I would like to say thanks to my second father, Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. You know, I grew up in 53 Russell. Kenrick Douglas is the name. I grew up in 53 Russell and Evans Street, Charlestown. And my father was a shoemaker. He didn't have all the resources for us. Someday, our lunch was onion and rice. You name it. That was a poverty-stricken area. But what I want to thank Forbes Burnham for Guyana National Service. Guyana National Service has so made Kenrick Douglas today who I am. A carpenter, a joiner, a mason, even down to the septic tank cleaner. Dignity in labor. So there I stand here with all the free education, what my Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham said. Not everybody, not every individual in this life have a brain to go to the books and write. So what he did in my day is open up community high schools. So at least if you don't have a brain, you have a pair of hands. So today, I stand proud to say, thank God for Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham for making me, Kenneth Roy, Clifton Douglas, what I am. So, Mr. Forbes, wherever you are, may God bless you and may He continue to keep you. Thank you very much.
I have a sneaking suspicion Burnham also made him dress the way he's dressed. I recognize another contributor, Dr. De Silva.
Thank you very much, Comrade Alexander, Comrade Hughes, brothers and sisters all. I could not have remained sitting in the audience and not come up front to thank the Burnham Foundation for the great work that you're doing, and to let some of our colleagues here know of what Burnham did for me as a young man. And I do not stand here representing myself, but I'm standing here representing the youths of Guyana. I remember I was merely 15 years and 10 months when I benefited from working at a toll station. And at that time, I had applied to Guyana School of Agriculture. I remember being accepted. But because of the fact that I was working with the Ministry of Finance as a toll collector, and at that time, Lyndon Forbes Burnham had instituted the policy of as long you go into a higher institution of learning, you continue to receive pay. So when I attended Guyana School of Agriculture free of cost, I continue to get my toll gate money. So I'm one of the products who benefited from nursery to tertiary because after Guyana School of Agriculture, I remember working at Wauna Yarakita, and then 1 or 2 months after, I got a scholarship to go to Cuba. There again, all expenses paid, plus receiving salary and a stipend from the government of Cuba. In addition to that, we were brought home on a yearly basis. That is thanks to the policies of Lyndon Forbes Sampson. And I remember clearly, I was from a family of 21. Daddy made 21 children that I knew about. I heard it was more like 27. Hami may know better because Hami and Daddy were very good friends. I am the 9th in that order. And I remember that because of Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham, I made a pledge that I will, when I return home, I would help the young people. And I remember purposefully going out and helping children, including a brother of mine who graduated as a doctor in veterinary medicine at the age of 23. I graduated at 24 because I thought that we should help the young people. And at least at this time, about 4 veterinarians came from my village or the neighboring villages. One last thing I would like you to know what Forbes Burnham did for someone like myself. He hired me as minister within the Ministry of Agriculture at the tender age of 25. I think at that time was the youngest serving minister of agriculture in Latin America and Caribbean. And when I checked, I didn't find any else all over the world. And I remember that our leader held me by my hands, literally on a daily basis, made sure he communicated with me, exposed me to all the great leaders who are coming to Guyana and all the great leaders within the country. And he himself, on many occasions, would be parked up in the helicopter and said, Doc or Simpson, come over, let's go to the Imperial, let's go wherever. And I remember that before going, he would send out people in advance to clear the way. So when I got grounded, I said I want to do like what Lyndon Forbes Sampson was doing. And I made sure that every village that I would visit, I sent a party in advance to clear the way so that our people, without any bias, be you African, Indian, Amerindian, you got the benefit of an advanced party. Dr. Reed used to do the same, clearing the way, clearing the path, so that when we get there, it's action. But Forbes Burnham used to make sure that the action was there before. And I remember when he connected me with Shidat Ramphal, Shahabuddin, and many others, so that I would help them, I would guide them. But at the same time, he told me, make sure you learn as you go along the way. Then he exposed me to national service. We did national service before going to Cuba. But when I came back, pay some attention. And I was paying very rapid attention. My knowledge and my desire for sustainable development is not now. It was from way back since I started to work with Lyndon Sir Sampson Burnham. And he said, look what I was doing at the various National Service Center. Each center specialized in a sector of development of the country. If you're talking about clean energy, cheap energy, and alternative energy, it was Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham who set out to make sure that hydropower, solar power, biogas, all of us went out creating those kinds of enterprises throughout the country. Some of you might be too young to know, but I am one of those who benefit from working with Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham in those areas and all other areas of sustainable development. So if one thing I would like to happen this evening is that let us all put our hands together to the father of sustainable development of Guyana. He's the one who gifted the 1 million acres of land. It's just that Hoyt and Chad and Chaddy and the rest had to see it through. But that idea came from none other but Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. So many things could have been done to the forest. So that pristine 87% of standing forest, we are responsible for that. And when I say we, understand what I'm saying, but guess what? I'm not hearing us taking credit for it. I'm not seeing us in the villages using that legacy that many spoke about before. I call on us to use effectively the legacy of Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham.
Thank you very much. I recognize, I'll take you just now, having just a moment, the colleague behind you.
Good afternoon, comrades all. Name Bonnie Stewart. The real name is Dennis Stewart, but if anybody look for Dennis Stewart, they won't find me. Bonnie Stewart is my name. I am aggrieved, really, by the wonderful speeches that were given here and the commendations spoken of our great beloved leader, Forbes Burnham. This is a foundation. Where is this foundation? We should have been gathered at a place where has been set aside especially for Lyndon Forbes Burnham. I am a security contractor. I had a security company and I do not have any company now. All was taken away from this present government. So I have a little money that is coming in from overseas. And I'm now gonna pledge $50,000 today to start a foundation so that when we gathered in the next couple of years, it must be someplace that we can say this is Burnham legacy. This is where Burnham lived for us, and we gotta continue to live for that legacy. I know my comrade here is doing a strong job. He has been there all the years, and he's been fighting almost single-handedly to promote this gathering that we have here. And I'm more or less disappointed that the amount of people that we have here, this should have been a place where it should have been overflowing with all the great and good things that were done by this comrade, Forbes Sampson Burnham. And I'm emotional. I'm very, very emotional. I'm 80-something years old, so let me cry with you for my leader. Okay? And comrades, let's all pledge that when we gathered in the future, we got to start looking for a proper foundation that we build and let forward so it could house the statue and all the good things people are saying about Burnham. It must be there recorded and documented, because I'm hearing things every day I hear things about Burnham. The comrades think so many pleasant things about Burnham, where it is. The African Union gave out a foundation where Burnham used to put $50,000 of Ghana money, which we didn't have, and send to Africa, and he didn't get the award that is due to him. All of those things we've still got to fight for. And let's fight to keep up the name of our great leader, Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. Thank you, folks.
Thank you very much, Comrade Stewart. As I said, we will not intermittently respond, so even to the comments of Comrade Stewart, there will be some response at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Vincent, and good afternoon, comrades. Good evening. I am very happy with the presentation done by Attorney Nigel Hughes. My name is Clayton Hines. I'm part of the foundation, but I want to say to Nigel, I know you have examined the history, what has happened over the time. What me personally, that man there, like my friend Douglas said, everything that I am today is as a result of Forbes Burnham. I was born in a place called Barracarroll, made famous recently with this guy, the cricketer Shamar Joseph. Now, I want to say that in those days, that man, as far as I can recall, what existed in this country then, the level of poverty, the level of disparity in terms of economics and social conditions of Guyana, necessitated Forbes Burnham visiting every place where people live in Guyana. Fortunately, during my work experience in the past, I participated in a few of those visits, and I was able to see a lot of things all over this country, region 1 to 10. Coming from Baraka, let me just tell you how I got into kind of politics. Forbes Burnham, like I said, this was part of his program of information and program of addressing issues that are of immediate needs to the people in the various communities. My father and mother, I born them meeting a little store, a grocery shop. But my father really is a farmer. My father and mother, but he's a specialist in music. Played the piano, organ, guitar, mandolin, violin, everything. But Forbes Burnham used to visit the Kanji River every year, sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times a year, and used to meet with the people up there and to talk with them. I was a young guy in primary school, coming out of primary school, and in those days, I consider myself very brave. And in one of those visits, he was there with Jeffrey Thomas and a few other members of his team. And I got up and spoke about the need to address issues pertaining to young people. And when I was finished, I think it was Kester, if I'm not mistaken, who said, the leaders asked you to speak with Jeffrey Thomas. That conversation was what started my involvement in development programs and activities for Guyana. Coming from Kanji River, I left and got a job on the advice of Jeffrey Thomas in the Ministry of Information. From the Ministry of Information, I worked in a lot of the region, in Region 6, first of all, then they transferred me to Region 1, then Region 3, then part of Region 4, then they sent me back to Region 6. Then from there was a new approach by the late Shirley Field Ridley, which she said, listen, the leader is requesting information officers who have worked in the various regions, that they themselves must be further educated to be able to deliver. And I remember the conference at Bishop's High School, where Adam Harris, myself, and all those persons who were in the media Prince Mason, Adam Harris, myself, Arnon Adams, Lloyd Conway. Was a long list. She said, everybody will have to go to the University of Guyana. And that was my step into the university, and from there on into other fields, lots of experience. GuyStat, Defense Secretariat, State Planning, all those places. Now, I say that to say this. Nigel has referred to free education. And I am telling you here today, if it was not for Forbes Burnham coming from Blackwater, Kanjikwik, I would have never been able to get, first of all, to secondary, secondly, to university. It would have been unthinkable. And I think I'm the only person in my family, except I have a sister in the US who also attended university, who attended the University of Guyana. And it was all because of the policies of Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. Now, the program that Nigel referred to, where Burnham addressed development perspectives collectively, taking into account the resources of every ethnic group in this country before a decision on policy approach is decided on, is very critical. Now, when you compare that to what is happening now, there is no kind of collective kind of decision in terms of anything developmental, nothing. Like I heard a comment here earlier to say that it is very selective in the programs that are being done, like the guy has described it as a literal transfer of the wealth to one ethnic group. That never used to happen under Burnham. He took account of everybody, what their needs are, and then is when the decision is made. And that is how people who have been part of the National Service and other developmental program that Burnham has introduced has been able to benefit, because it was not him just waking up tomorrow morning. He sung it off on everybody. He don't care whether you're Amerindian, East Indian, or Black or white. He sung it off on every group to hear what is it they're thinking. We had no money then, and we couldn't afford, but still we were trying to liberate South Africa, sending people money to South Africa. We had no money then. We have money now. And you are not hearing this same collective approach to development. You're not hearing that. Very selective. So when I come to forums like these, I always say to myself, I hope that all of us will be awakened to the reality that is happening around us and take action. Take action in the interest of all the people of Guyana, not some of the people, of all the people of this country. I don't have a formula as to how this could be done, but I think one of the measures we can use is that come time when we have a say to make that change, we do just that, so that we can get rid of these people who are selective in our developmental program, to get them out of there and vote right. Thank you.
Another contributor comes forward.
Good evening, members of the head table, comrades all. Sister Penda, little woman, Sister Isme Dalrymple from West Bobis, 72 years old. I will have my little, yes, young, you won't get at us now. Drama is the thing, so don't feel fun. Yes, brethren all. You know, I am feeling so much emotional in that Hammy in the house. And those days that I can recall, our late Lyndon Forbes Sampson. You know, he was a man of every inch, yard, and mile. 'Cause I used to walk and run and meet the people. Am I hearing right? I can't hear you people. You hungry? All right. Howbeit, he said, the youths of today will be what? The leaders of tomorrow. I enjoyed from primary to tertiary. Even though things weren't that easy, but perseverance. Where there's a will, there's a what? And look at my boy smiling with me. You know, the legacy. I got here late, but I said I have to be here today to let the comrades know. It was an easy road for him, but thank God he had the intellect and the inspiration that was given to the Almighty God. That it's still in him, that he moved us from one. You know what, Vex? When Lyndon said, yeah, go take the land, go take the land. Everybody pulling their car, no, they know. What happened? Even as time prolonged, I will sell our land. What is happening today? You got to run to get things to purchase. Let us regroup ourselves. In unity, there is strength. And let us move hastily that we will regroup ourselves and go forward to fulfill the aspiration of the late Lyndon Forbes Samson Burnham. I thank you for giving me the opportunity, and I'm looking for $3,000 for gold.
Good evening, everyone. All protocols observed. As I was sitting there, I said, I cannot not get up to share what our great leader, Lyndon Forbes Samson Burnham, would have done for me and my entire family. We grew up pretty poor, never felt that we were poor, but we were poor. And I was just like about 8 years old when the Cadet Corps came into being. And when you were in school, you had a choice whether or not you would have liked to have been part of that, which meant every Monday morning we had muster. We had our uniform, green uniforms, skirt pants, green yachting boots, you had your hat. You were taught how to march. You were taught that this country, Guyana, belongs to us. I remembered when the song Not a Blade of Grass came out. My family used to live, we used to live in New Amsterdam, Babies in particular. There was supposed to have been a march in the morning starting at 5 o'clock. My mother knew that I was pretty involved at that age, but as a girl child, she would not have wanted me to come out by myself. But my PT partners, I don't know if you folks ever had that, my PT partners, because when you were part of the National Service, the Cadet Corps, every morning there was PT. What would have happened is that it would start this morning at your home and you pick up the other person, you run straight around the village and you run around and you had your PT. So the persons who will come out in the morning for PT came very early. Then we had that very morning, when we started off the march, we were going to Burnham Park. We had thunder and lightning. And I can remember vividly marching with honor and dignity and pride to the song, "We Are Not Giving Up Any Mountain." If anybody at that point in time had said, "Nicola, we will place you at the borders to defend this country at such a tender age," I would have gone. Moving on quickly, I was the product of free education from nursery to tertiary. There would have been no way, with all the children, 10 of us, that my mother made, that we would have been able to go there. We were poor, but we were never hungry because of the policies that Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham had. You had the KSI, where you could have gone for reasonable stuff. He also came around with seeds and told you to plant. We planted every square inch of our yard, including outside the parapet and everything. Then you had the coconut estate, Hope, where once a month, once you were part of, then I was chairman for the YSM in my district. Once you were part of that, you would have gone there to help to pick the coconuts. All of these policies that we had then geared towards the development of young people and women, which is currently missing right now. I got into CARICOM the Caribbean Community Secretariat, at a very young age, or in a reasonable sum at a very young age, because of the policy of free education. And I would like us as a people to ensure that we tell our children and our grandchildren of this outstanding gentleman, Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. One more thing. I have a daughter who is 6'2". She attended the President's College. And I saw her in the yard. She was supposed to have had a parade the next day, attempting to march. And I called my husband. I said, "Simpson, a child of ours cannot march. This should never be." And we spent our time teaching her and a few others in the neighborhood how to march. And I am saying that although the policies may not be implemented right now, we can keep it alive. So put your hands together again for Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. Thank you.
All right, I will cede to Elder Green at this moment.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Chairman. First of all, let's give Nigel a round of applause for his presentation. Been in this business for a long time, before some of you were born. And Nigel's analysis is profound. The problem is we face not only recolonization, but a dissipation God's bounty to us. And if we don't act with precision and courage today, what is now a blessing will become a curse. I've listened to the addresses this afternoon. I listened to young Nigel. My present wife is a physician, a real doctor. And I grew up in a drugstore. It is sometimes quite easy to analyze the problem, the infection, and the disease. As Nigel did with such elegance, but the problem is the prescription. Allow me, therefore, to deal with that crucial issue and hope that all of us assembled here haven't come out of curiosity. But if we really believe that we are becoming an endangered species, we will do what we can to change the conditions in this country. It is unnecessary. It is not appropriate for me to eulogize Burnham. You knew where I stand on that matter. He died in 1985. And in a sense, the spirituality of the movement he started died. It's a complex issue which we may analyze at another time. And I want to suggest one, that what Nigel said is on target. But what's the next move? The enemy don't mind us talking, you know. We can talk here from now till next year. And as we've seen with the indecency with the teachers, they have a myopia, they don't care. And we've got to persuade them. And I use the word persuade in its delicate sense, that we are not going to stand for this thing much longer. And they need to change from their extant arrogance and disrespect and disdain for people. Face this fact. We have lost at least one, if not two generations of young people represented by all of us here and beyond. And the first task is to educate them in its pure sense as to where they are and what they need to do, so we take a next courageous step to save this country of ours. And I'm suggesting to the Burnham Foundations, I did privately sometime, that we use this venue and others, particularly now we have the teachers on strike, to bring groups of people here, not those who come to eulogize Burnham alone, those who will have the knowledge. Nigel, in his presentation, alluded to what Lord Bacon once said, knowledge is power. To have the knowledge to understand the history of this country, where we are and what we need to do. As you speak to some young people, they have been so brainwashed and confused. At the highest level, they're not too sure what is happening next. So the first task, Vincent, is to use every opportunity, if it's 6 or 7 people, young people in their teens, to sit them down and tell them where we came from, where we are, and what we need to do for tomorrow. You see, the race issue is real. Today I spent much of my morning speaking to 4 groups of people. I will name one, if you wouldn't mind. My first conversation with Dr. Steve Switchbody, who came to get information from me from a letter I had written. He wanted to get a copy of the book, March of Folly by Barbara Tushman. I next saw another group, an Indo-Guyanese and an Afro-Guyanese, concerned about our future. I met another group, including a son of mine who Nigel knows, and we talked about tomorrow. The issue is to inform our people, beginning from the school children. I meet young people who don't care. And the tragic condition is, as the Indo-Guyanese who saw me on my second meeting this morning observed, that you're dealing with some people who are so money-centered. We've got to begin to sell the message. I'm speaking here as a disciple of Burnham, to send a message to them that yes, they can afford to buy a second-hand car today, which they couldn't last year. But you have to present figures, as Nigel did on more than one occasion, to say that if there's a better distribution of this oil bonanza, they can get a new car instead of a second car. But we've got to persuade people, whether Indo, Afro, or Doglo-Guyanese, that this wealth is not being fairly distributed. And even though they may seem comfortable, and this government has well-paid propagandists, don't underestimate them. Alibaba, and if I may twist history and the 4 thieves, I'll talk with top thief men, have studied the weakness of our people. And I hope, therefore, that we can work on this project, because those rascals, if they perceive as a consequence of what Glenn has been saying on radio, on Kaito Radio, editorials in the 2 independent media, that they are sliding, they're going to call a snap elections. I've been in this business long. And we have to begin the preparation to deal with that prospect today. And so, Vincent, my proposal is very simple. Get school children, if you can get them to listen to you, and our teachers, all of us here, the Commonwealth who offer $50,000, let's use that initially to reach people and talk to them.
Because it is not like 40, 50 years ago, you know. Today, we celebrated the anniversary of Black Friday 1962. And I saw a letter in the media written by some Mr. Cummings, I think. A tired writing. He doesn't know the whole story. He doesn't know half the story. And I can't talk the whole story yet. But I shall begin writing and pass that on to the comers who I can talk to. Black Friday 1962, as we celebrated today, is the anniversary. Didn't happen by accident. The letter talked about the Caldo budget. When things were going quiet, Burnham called a young gentleman who was at the center of Congress Place. I don't know if you know him. And said, calling his name, "Why is the city so quiet?" That gentleman acted and brought Jagan to his senses when he had said to the workers, "Not a cent more." But that didn't happen by accident. Because at the center of the political directorate, we had people who are in touch with the grassroots. And all of us who spoke here today must leave here committed to put within the ambit of your control and influence 6 people, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. These are serious days. And I leave that message, that plea, with the Burnham Foundation so that we can save this country. Let me say something else. I was influenced by my mother, who grew up in the United States. Nigel's father and my mother were friends. Kavakamites. And she nursed me, weaned me into politics by just telling me stories of her experiences in the Deep South. We need to do that to our young people. I always remember a story she told me, that she was in one of these trains, and when you cross the Mason-Dixon line, that's a line that divides the north from the south. Burly chaps will come out, they were conductors. The niggers, get behind. And she tells me the story. My great-great-grand-uncle, Philip Josie, Philip will have to stand up and go the back of the train. He was a sharecropper. They were allowed to walk those knives sharp. He used to shave with it at the 2 ends. So as the 2 white fellows came to him, he took out a sharecropper knife. He said, "Lord, I is coming home, but I'm bringing 2 white bitches with me." Now, come as I said that to relieve a tense situation. But we've got to imbue our young people with that spirit of courage and bravery. You're not dealing with an ordinary set of people in this country, you know. You do it bandits X par excellence. And we must, in the first instance, as I've been trying to do, one them promised to come and see me. Can't call his name. But if the captain on the captain's deck is Bharat and Ali, who is being portrayed as a saint. They have to learn the language that they will understand. Because if we don't, we'll betray the legacy of Burnham, Coffee, Kwabena, and then more martyrs. I hope on another occasion to deal in depth with this issue and to offer my services. Old as I am, well, not old, got a few years up top. I ain't seen too good, but everything else is working, including my brain. And I'm prepared to dedicate that time, as I did this morning, to young people, so they'll have the bunks and energy to fight an enemy who is fighting on all fronts. Those people, as the Indian comrade who saw me at my second meeting said, they're only interested in money. But we must say we want piece of the gravy. And if you look at world history, people like Nigel and Vincent must have to examine the world as it is today. In the 50s and the 60s, when I was on the front line, it was the Cold War. Today, as far as we are concerned, it's a complex situation, and I admit I don't have all the answers. We have India vying for space here in complicity with the present government. And you must know it's not new. In 1961, Dr. Jagan, I like him, I get on very well with him. Very charming man. We lacked a certain perspicacity. It was he who, in collaboration with the then Indian government, who tried to bring in hundreds of Indians from Kerala, India. Why? The then fairly conservative Indian government had no difficulty with getting rid of these Indians from Kerala. It was a communist state in India. But when we got the news, we made it, to use Burnham's term, my wife who went to Bishop, like Nigel, tell me it's not the proper way to say it. But if Burnham said it, he got to be right, and I'm going to say it. We made it pellucidly clear that we wouldn't guarantee their safety. So they never came. You have to understand what is happening in India with Modi right now, where he's destroyed 2 Muslim mosques. You have to tell those stories to the Indian brothers, because when I was a youngster, the issue was not between Afro and Indo-Guyanese. It was between Hindus and Muslims. My father had to settle disputes almost every day in the shop, in drugstore. You have China, who is quietly waiting to gobble up our resources. The British, a set of SOBs. The Americans. Now, you have Mr. Trump or Mr. Biden. I don't know what will happen. But I can't say it publicly. But It might be useful if little lunacy prevail in November in the elections. But I can't talk, I don't know who writing notes. Then you have Pakistan, all with their eyes on Guyana. And you have a government run all over this world to invite investors when we don't have the ability to absorb what we already have. We have enough gold, diamond, bauxite, manganese to make every Guyanese comfortable and happy. Why are you going outside and beg for more people to come in? It's like a man, you put a plate of food, you can't finish it, but you want a second plate. So, comrades, we deal with a formidable enemy. And I've been a boxing fan all my years. And the mistake some boxers make is when they enter that ring to underestimate the opponent. And this Burnham Foundation, as somebody said, this place should be jam-packed. All of us here who spoke must have the bounden duty to organize with Vincent. Nigel is a good speaker, but don't think we want him to go in the trenches now. He got a nice suit there, he's a decent fellow. But we need people that we had in the 60s who the arch enemy of Guyana must know are prepared to listen to this tune so far and no further. These people, look, the little girl sings to the calypso. I hope all of us would use it in our cell phones at this time every day. What she said? Something 6.5 can work. They're so presumptuous. A little girl, but they're stupid. They've made her calypso now more popular than she had won. So, Commissioner, I don't want to spend too much time recounting history, except to remind you, we need to know the origins of this Apanjat story and to tell it so that we can persuade our Indian brothers that they and us need a bigger share of the cake. The race question is difficult because when you wake up in the morning, you go to the mirror, you know who you are. I don't have enough doctors like my wife and others. In 1947, my father took me by the hand. He was the most popular person in All Boys Town. That's why I couldn't understand how we beat him at the local government elections. Another story. My father took me by the hand to chair a meeting at St. Thomas's School in Ketley Street, opposite to where my godmother lived, Mrs. Gibson, whose husband was half white and half Indian, and she was mixed up too. Her daughter's Shirley Chin, her grandson is Brian Chin, who some of you may know. Took me to that meeting. It's very popular in the area. A man called Daniel Prabhudas Debedin, an Indian solicitor at the time. And Debedin, they had about 60% Indians, 40% black people. Broke off in Hindi. My father took him by the hand, went across, picked up his bicycle, and walked out of the meeting. The next day, one of the Indian men came to my father, Drexel, and said, Daniel Prabadas, they've been telling you to vote Apanjat. That's how it started. Now, the fact that the PP benefited from it is another matter. And the propaganda is so ruthless that in the media the other day, a man had they have ladies here, can I use the appropriate word? Testicular apparati. To say Burnham started Apanjat. Absolute rubbish. We need to inform our young people to debunk this propaganda that is being peddled. And finally, comrade children, I'll not talk too long, but there's a child old age. Beware, Hoyt made a statement. Don't say I'm saying about the Portuguese mafia. All I'm saying, beware of that group who still believe that they have an opportunity to recast history and be on top. The history of this country suggests that the only people who deserve to be on top are those whose ancestors suffered for centuries without a cent. We welcome the indentured people. Give them an education. And Burnham sought to unite the people. But based on the demographics, the new Indians were a larger group. They didn't want that. So when people tell you Burnham benefit from Apanjat, use some cuss words. It was the other side. And as they're rewriting our history, tell them that it was Burnham's wisdom which got him into office in 1964. I was General Secretary at a critical time. And if, as I told one of the groups I met this morning, if they say you rig elections, I say we should keep rigging to save us from these devils, these bastards, these demons that we have. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Elder Green. Elder Green had asked at an earlier point in time to speak, and I had not ceded the mic to him. And that was not by accident. It was my intention, in fact, in respect of his status, to give him the last say from the floor. So at this time, forgive me if I don't solicit other hands and other comments. Given the time we have spent, I will now cede the floor to our presenter to respond as he deems fit to the comments which were made, and more particularly to the question which may have been asked. Nigel.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Honey is always, he's been there forever, so. No, I say this because we miss quite often the essence of what he is saying. And I'm going to go to the first or second question and then come back to the message. There was a question about the transfer of wealth from the state to one community. Because we are quite often driven by the heart, we assume everybody else is driven by the heart. And while we are crying and mourning and appealing to people's sense of decency, the wealth is continuing to be transferred away from us. We say that academically, and Hami's right. It's easy to talk. I could just about do it for a living. But we don't understand the damage that is being done permanently to our community. Let me just give you the reality of what is happening here. We all applaud and applauded today free education in 76, and we see the benefit of it. What we don't realize is that by that transfer of wealth, our children and grandchildren will not have the same education that you had. That's not in theory. Think about it. If you make it today to a semi-decent position in the ministry or somewhere else, your children will be cleaning floors and your grandchildren will be cleaning floors. You have to put it in stark, realistic terms. And it is happening at a time when the country got more money than God could think about. Burnham never had resources. Never had resources. The country never had those resources. And how could you, at the time of the greatest wealth in the history of this country, condemn your next generation to second-class citizenship? Let me use that, and indulge me a bit. Let me use that Amerindian example I gave you with the education. We're not a single student from the Riverine and Hinterland community has got an A. Walk through that. That means every 15, 16, 17-year-old Amerindian child will not be able to qualify for a job in the oil economy because they just don't have the qualifications. So what are the options? Thief or clean shoes or prostitution? Don't laugh at it. That's the reality, because they're not going to get educated after school. And they are then put in a position where you come with 25 and 30 and 100,000 and $250,000 and say, hey, vote for me. And they will continue that perpetual cycle of poverty for 3 to 4 generations. That little indigenous child who could become a doctor, engineer, is condemned, can't get to 1% of his capacity. I pick a remote-ish example. Think of what's happening in the inner schools, in the city schools in this country. What's happening in the dolphins and what have you. This is what's going to happen to our men, and I'll come to the women in a minute. Either you're going to crime or hustle drugs, which means you can die by the time you're 45. This is the statistics, you know. I'm not giving you emotionally dramatic figures. You will get shot by the time you're 45, or one of your partners will shoot you. As we read every day in the papers, it's some drug war. Or you're going to go through prison, come out prison, go through prison. But you will never be in a position where you are in control of a company that is a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. A year ago, I published some statistics. Gold mining permits to export gold out of this country. They gave 6 licenses. Only 1 was given to an African Guyanese. That's in one sector. Look at the contracts that are being given out to build roads, build culverts. Check and see how many companies are anything other than the primary supporters of the present administration. And every day we sit down and they tell us, look, you're seeing the signs of progress. You are seeing the glory of our wealth. And ask yourself whether your child could go into any financial institution, qualify for a loan that will make them eligible to build any of those major projects that are going on. It's like being in Vegas and dazzled by the lights and you can't find 10 cents to get on a bus to go home. We are in real crisis. Now, here is our problem. And this is what we don't make the connection. Burnham brought us free education, not just to say, hey, I'm qualified, because they know we like to dress up in the suit and we vulnerable, we emotional, you know. In the old days, we used to like to sound good, you know, lawyer, I'm a lawyer, blah, blah. But we have never used education for what it is intended to be used, as a tool for us to become better off. You don't become a lawyer just to say you're a lawyer. You have to become a lawyer so that you have a successful enterprise so that hopefully your next generation can start at a higher level. And that applies across the board. We have always misunderstood the purpose of education. We thought it is okay just to be academically qualified, and we have never transferred it and used it for its true purpose, which is as a tool to acquire and develop wealth. So I digressed a little bit to come back to the question about the transfer of the assets from the state and how do you address it. I use the term disaggregated data, and perhaps a lot of us don't quite get it. And I'm going to pick a disease, diabetes. If I, as the Minister of Health, say I'm giving $100 million, $20 million to each of the 10 regions, $2 million to each of the 10 regions to deal with diabetes, everybody will get up and say, great, equal distribution of the resources in health. But if 90% of the people who suffer from diabetes are in region 10, and some regions have 1% and 0%, it means that region 10, which should have most of the resources to fight diabetes, will only get 10%, while the regions that have no diabetic challenge will get $2 million to do what? To go develop their community. They don't have diabetes. The difference between the data of saying 10 regions, $20 million each, and region 10, which has the greatest medical crisis, getting $80 million to deal with the crisis because it is relevant, is the difference between data and disaggregated data. Hami touched on it. We were far more educated in the 50s, 60s, and 70s about why we were in the condition we were in at that time. Perhaps because it was stark. The foreigners lived in the fancy areas, and the rest of us live in poor areas. But we somehow have got confused because when we became independent and the color of the people who are governing them in Guyana changed, we didn't bother to look at the numbers. What we started to say, well, everything is okay. And that is precisely our feeling today. The complaint that Elder Green spoke about how quiet we are, is because if you look realistically at what is happening to your community, in other words, if they gave you the real data about what is happening in your community, on a point of principle, You don't get up and say, black people ain't getting their share. You get up and say, the data shows that by your distribution of the natural resources of this country, you are segregating and isolating a part of this country that is entitled, it's not a favor, entitled to their share. And with this oil, the level of ignorance in our approach, no political party put that oil in the ground. We lucky to be in this geographic space in which each and every one of us is entitled to the proceeds of that resource. Start off with that level of consciousness. So irrespective of who is in government, you are entitled to your part, your share. And I dare say, paid in full long ago. So where the government seeks to say it is their resource to give to you, that is where we say, no, not so. And as Brother Green said, we tell you nicely, and then we may not tell you so nicely. That resource belongs to each and every one of us. And we have to start with that level of consciousness. And this is across the board. Indigenous, Black, Indian, Chinese, mix up. Start with that principle. We have to understand the underlying political philosophy. If you have a budget that allocates resources so-called to infrastructural development, it doesn't stop there. Who is building the infrastructural development? Who has the means and the capacity to do that? And so when the second round of contracts come around, you still are not in a position to qualify. Every single bit of information that I published in Economy and Justice a year ago, which I thought was horrendously embarrassing to the state, 5 out of 6 gold licenses. Of the contracts, only, I think it was 9 or 10% of the construction contracts going to anything other than one class. Sand pits. For infrastructure, sand and stone. Investigate who has the licenses for sand pits and for stone. And tell me how you are going to end up with equality and equal access to resources if you're only giving those licenses to one set of people. It is as if the Dutch in South Africa, where they formally went and established apartheid as a system of laws, we ain't doing it by law, we're doing it by fact. We're doing it by action. Because you will never be in a position to be able to qualify to get any of those contracts across the board because the resources are going in, are consolidating one community only. And we all get dazzled. What a man on the road said, money got for neck. And we don't realize that that is just part of the system in which we get set aside, excluded, voluntarily under what we call democracy. We don't understand the game. And as Hami said, each one must teach one. It is our responsibility to teach and explain so that people understand what time of day it is. He did his work. He did his work outstandingly. He gave us the tool, he gave us the education because the country didn't have the wealth to give you. And if you don't have the education to manage the wealth, it will be taken from you. So understand the time of day. I agree, we respect him for what he has done. But we, 70 years later, got to wake up and be responsible going forward. We have to ensure that each and every one of our children, grandchildren, cousins, aunties, community members in this modern market economy. We can't go back to the days where the state could take over the institutions and provide you with the privilege. Market economy is where we are at. In the old days, you could have spoken about socialism and that. We're not there. We have to understand what is going on, and more importantly, neocolonialism is when people outside of your country determine your policy, and they have no interest in determining any policy for your benefit unless their benefit is greater than yours. So we have to spend time educating each other and translating all this data and information we get from social media. Don't get distracted by it. Analyze it. And most importantly, we have to have a goal. It's not just progress. It is how it is measured, how we are going to move forward. So my urge to you tonight is that we respect the fantastic work that Burnham has done. Irony of ironies, if you go back 30, 40 years, if you had said to my parents or anybody that I would be giving the feature address at the Lfs Burnham Institute, they would say you're mad. But when your back is against the wall and you understand the system that has perpetually attempted to keep you in that position, it is your duty, incumbent duty, to make sure that everybody truly understands what is going on. So I will close in answer to your observations by saying, educate, use it as a tool, and build the economic resources to be able to fight and protect. The unjust wars that you see in the world today continue because you don't have the economic resources. And we don't want to end up by the side of the river singing how bad we are, how badly off we are, how the battle will come next time when we can stop now and start to plan and prepare for what is evidently happening and say, enough is enough. The time has come in which all of us are entitled to our share, and for some of us, we have paid in full a long time ago. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigel. There was one question which was asked that is pertinent to the foundation per se. The foundation accepts the argument that there's a need for much more permanency, etc., of the foundation. But there is still insufficient news out there in relation to some degree of permanency, because the foundation, whilst it might not have a big auditorium, it does have a permanent secretariat located in a place called Legacy House for a reason, at 584 High Palm Road, South Rhinefeld Gardens. And we happen to be open on a daily basis from 10 in the morning to 6 in the afternoon. And much of the resource material related to the work of Burnham is available at that place and available to the public at large. So I just thought I would make that known, that there is some presence that could be impactful, and we probably have to do a lot more work to let the public know. But there is a place called the Burnham Foundation that's accessible to the public. May I remind you that today's activity is but the first in a short list, and that tomorrow at 2 p.m. the foundation meets for its annual general meeting at that place which I just referred to, Legacy House, 584 High Palm Road, South Rifle Gardens, just off of Topville Bridge. And you're all welcome to be a part of that gathering so we can start to swell the numbers of the foundation. And membership forms are available in this room at the back. So you can, in fact, take membership even this evening. And once you do that, then we'll have you in our database and you'll be able to be a part of the activities that we are engaged in. While sitting here, Reverend Pierre, who is the pastor of the Kitty Methodist, has sent out the relevant flyer. The supplement flyer is already sent out for the church service on Sunday at 8 a.m. at Kitty Methodist. And you're all invited to commune with us at Kitty Methodist, Sunday, 8 a.m. at the usual annual church service. And Sunday afternoon, well, just for information, more or less, we will have our usual commemorative cycle race, which is scaled down a bit, but still from Carifest Avenue to Belfield and back. All are welcome. One other thing I would wish to say is that we're hoping, coming out of our annual general members meeting this year, we should be launching a think tank. And we have reached out to a number of young people. Think tanks don't have to be too large, so we wouldn't ask everybody to be a member of the think tank. But we certainly hope that during the course of the year to come, the ongoing year, the think tank will start to do its work that will allow us to be able to be far more present in terms of putting the ideas out there, speaking to people, influencing people in their thought processes that would help them to be a part of what has got to be a movement. So colleagues, friends, comrades, thank you very much for your attendance. We understand the realities that we are faced with. We have done a fair amount of publicity to get people here. And we knew what the numbers would be like. That's why we didn't go downstairs. We stayed upstairs. We understand our reality. Suffice to say that there is a substantial number of people who have joined us on social media. So we are not alone. The number is far more than those of us who are sitting here because of those who joined on social media. So once again, thank you very much, colleagues. Look out for us as we continue to do the work that we are doing, and we have not mentioned the work that we're doing here. That wasn't the reason for today's activity, but there are other things which are being done, including our ongoing mentorship scheme among young people. We have a mentorship scheme where we try to work with young people, and our ongoing television program. And in fact, we're hoping this year also to launch our own social media platform so we can be much more active in terms of constantly reaching out to the wider community. Nigel, thank you very much for agreeing to present. I'm quite sure that all who are present will leave understanding why you are the chosen person to make the presentation. And I hope the naysayers themselves would come to some understanding, because there were some people who raised the question today, why Nigel? But Nigel wasn't plucked from the air. Our board sat and discussed and determined that Nigel was one of two persons who we thought would fit the bill. The other one is overseas. And so once Nigel agreed, we did not proceed with the second of the two persons who we think did fit the bill. And undoubtedly, Nigel's presentation has vindicated our decision to have him. And so we are most grateful, Nigel. And I had to say today to some of those naysayers, they don't know things, everything. Nigel has, for years now, been one of our main go-to persons. I mean, many of you may have gone to our concerts in the past, and every time we had a concert, we were able to go to Sidewalk Cafe and to get that band at no cost to make our concerts a success. So we know to whom we can turn, and we know who the faithfuls are. Daniel, thank you once again. And forgive me for going on. When we started our mentorship scheme some years ago, we started with a one-on-one mentorship. And even at that time, and this had nothing to do with politics, it had to do with who we are and what resources we thought were available. We asked Nigel and Kathy to be among the individual mentors for our young people. And they did indeed mentor, I think, one or two persons at that time. And this is about 15 years ago. It was about 15 years ago that relationship started. It had nothing to do with politics. It just had to do with the community and who we think could make a meaningful contribution to the community. And we are reaching out to each and every one of you in whatever way possible to join in making a contribution. Thank you very much and have a safe journey home. And Mr. Stewart, please repair to the back to the young lady in white so we can have your contact information so we can follow up on your promise. Thank you very much. No, the young lady at the back.